went to school at Boston College. I worked for the Washington Post and APM Reports in their podcast unit, and then went on to work for CBS Sunday Morning, and then went back into the documentary space. My most recent film, Change the Name, follows a group of young activists here in Chicago as they work to rename a park. So what used to be referred to as Stephen Douglas Park on the west side in North Lawndale has been renamed to Anna Mary and Frederick Douglass Park. So that short film follows their journey. And we premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival in June and are currently on BET and available digitally. So yeah, that's the.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley O'Shea. I'm originally from Indianapolis, but I ventured to Chicagoland via Northwestern, where I went for undergrad for film school. I basically started Unapologetic as soon as I graduated, but outside of that, I also work as a freelance cinematographer for all types of film, documentary, narrative, branded content. I found my love for that when I was at Northwestern. That's really when I was beginning to build my technical skills in cinematography, and on a lot of the scripted short films. And that's also when I started to take documentary courses that introduced me to like critically acclaimed films. A lot of them from Cai Thomas, who co-produced this. And yeah, since I graduated, I've just been kind of doubling both sides of working in the freelance cinematography space. I kind of fumbled my way forward through Unapologetic as the director, producer, cinematographer, etc. And I also used to work in the projection booth of this film center. So it's really a full circle moment to be here right now.
Hi, my name is Judith Mcrae, and I'm a documentary filmmaker and a media producer now here in Chicago. I was born and raised in eastern Iowa, and my entire career goal was to get out of Iowa. I went to Northwestern and Medill, right? And for the last, however, almost 24 years, I have had my own media production company, Juneteenth Productions, which I started before the federal holiday, using the name because I wanted people to know about it. And the majority of my work, both independent as well as client-based, has been documentaries or documentary styles, totally focused on social change and social justice. So my last independent documentary is called Tal Como Somos, Just As We Are, where I followed a group of Latinx men and women who are transgender and LGBTQ, and we're dealing with how they had survived and, as activists, dealt with the machismo part of Latino culture. Most recently, however, I've been working a lot with podcasts, and my passion project is Change Agents, where I'm working as co-executive producer, working with emerging journalists and storytellers of color, working with Chicago's communities of color to tell the stories about change going on that the mainstream media is not covering, and finding the authenticity in our voices to tell those stories.
That's great, right? Wow. All right, so we have a stellar panel here. What we're going to do now is we're going to do a couple of little mini case studies, and each filmmaker is going to tell you a little bit about how they were able to leverage their networks and personal experience to bring you their current project. You know, they're going to talk about who helped them, where they found the money. We have this, in this industry, there are a lot of things that are invite only. We'll talk a little bit about that. And they're going to talk about some of the challenges along the way. We're going to, again, start at the end with Cai and work our way back this way.
You chose that speech?
Not on purpose. So, as I said earlier, my most recent project, Change the Name, premiered at Tribeca, and it's currently on BT. I hear her. So, I met those young folks in 2018, and I started documenting them and made a short film there that helped me to earn a fellowship through Sundance. And that sort of changed the trajectory of my career after having been like in the traditional news space. And that same year is also the first time I met Yvonne, and she was just like starting to, ideate on like what would be the documentary fellowship program, which Ashley and I are a part of. I was DPing here in Chicago, and I hadn't really thought frequently about like the VLA young folks. And then in 2020, when the uprising started, their educator Bianca reached out to me because we had stayed in contact and was like, hey, like, can you just come and film and document? I had nothing else going on. It's the pandemic. So I was like, sure, of course. Like, I own my own equipment, which is a really important thing, like camera equipment. Like, filmmaking is expensive, like point blank period. Like, everybody on this panel will tell you how expensive of a process it can be. And what Yvonne said of leveraging networks is so important. Like, in my house right now is Ashley's camera, so I can rent it because I'm shooting something for the New York Times next week. But I started filming. Yeah, I started filming again for Change the Name in 2020, and it wasn't to make a film. It was really just because I cared about those young folks and the educators. And then maybe a month into it, we realized that like the name change was actually going to happen. So I have monthly meetings with Yvonne. Like she'll check in and be like, okay, what's going on? Like with my independent work versus like the work I'm getting hired to do. And she was like, you need to reach out to the Jonathan Logan Foundation. Like, you need to start having conversations with the Field Foundation. Like, they have the resources to give you immediate funding so you can have a sound person so that you have quality sound. So, I talked to the Jonathan Logan Foundation on a Monday. They gave us money on a Friday. Like, that was the quickest amount of time that I'd ever received funding. And it was, I mean, that goes to the power of like Yvonne and her network and like what she means in the Chicago media landscape. So a lot of Illinois-based organizations started giving us money. And then that winter, I got an email from Tribeca Studios, who runs a program called the Queen Collective with P&G and Queen Latifah to help to help fund Black women filmmakers. And so, we started talking with them, and then Queen Latifah came on board and gave us like another round of funding for the film, which was, really exciting. And what Yvonne said is really true. Like, it's not an open call, right? They're handpicking the people that they want to send proposals to. And I recognize that all the time, that I'm really fortunate. And I also like have the work that shows that I'm like capable of receiving a 6-figure budget for a film and like actualizing it. So it it is a really fortunate place to be in. But in terms of challenges, this is definitely like the most financially stable I've been in my filmmaking career. And I think Ashley and I are like really cognizant of like, what does it mean that like after this reckoning year has happened is like when people really want to invest in Black filmmakers, and having conversations with funders to be like, hey, I'm still going to need your support in my career past 2021. Would you support me doing a film that has like nothing to do with movement work? Like Yvonne and I had a conversation earlier in the lobby where like a lot of people want films that just are about 2020, but like what does it mean to show like happiness and joy and documentation as well? I think that's something that's really important. So I feel really fortunate and blessed, and I want to hear Ashley's, the miniature. I know the longer version story of how Unapologetic came to be. I can tell you. So that's the thing. Like Queen Latifah has a relationship with them. So it's like she's the one who decided the distribution deal. So previously, the Queen Collective films had been distributed via Hulu. And then last year, so this is the third year of the program. The first year they did Hulu. The second year they did BET. And then this third year they're doing BET again. And they have that partnership with them. So I wasn't a part of like the distribution conversations. It was already set in place.
As you all can see, Bella Baz is in the audience. Let's have a round of applause for Bella Baz. Yeah, Unapologetic took 4.5 years, but it feels like it took 10 years off of my life. So that's the quickest way I could kind of talk about its journey. I started the film in the fall of 2015 when I was interning at Cai Thomas Films, which has a 55-year history here in Chicago. They're best known for Hoop Dreams. And while I was there, I showcased a short version of this. Initially, I ideated on this as a short. But then when the Laquan McDonald moment happened, I think that was like a realization for me that this should be expanded into a longer feature piece. So after that internship season, I actually funneled straight into their fellowship called Diverse Voices in Docs for first-time filmmakers of color in Chicago. And it was really like a 6-month crash course on how to do a feature film. And I was like, oh, what have I gotten myself into? Mostly because when I first saw like the budget numbers and like applying, a lot of independent film, or at least for documentary, depends on like film grants. So the proposals for those is literally like kind of writing mini novels about a project that doesn't even fully exist yet. And you're having to create a narrative that you don't even know if it's going to happen. And during that time, I was working almost entirely independently. Like I said, I was shooting most of the film by myself. I was borrowing and stealing whatever I could steal from Northwestern. I was literally still hitting up friends that could access the film cage, or people that had, like, that's why the beginning of the film, cinematography-wise, for me, is real rough. But, you know, growth and change, because I was literally shooting it on, like, six different cameras. And then I think towards the end of David, I just realized, like, this film needs some investment. David's Diverse Voices in Docs, the Cai Thomas program that I did. Throwing the acronyms. So after I finished that up, our first money in actually was an Indiegogo campaign that we ran for a couple months that was like $8,000, and I was like, oh, we making it now. We got $8,000. That is really funny to think about now. But with that money, though, I was able to hire a team for the first time. So I was able to hire my editor, Ruben Daniels, for the first time. He had been working for free. I was able to bring on Morgan Elise Johnson, the producer of the film. And I think after that, I just started applying to everything. So the first kind of major thing I got into was a fellowship with Firelight Media, which is kind of like a national scale Diverse Voices in Docs. And have done a lot of like Stanley Nelson films and other amazing just filmmakers of color in the doc space. And so, I got into that fellowship, and I was able to sit in the room with people that were like Yvonne. That's where we met the first time. Yeah, we were at a retreat, and Yvonne walked up to me, and she was like, "You're from Chicago? Why don't I know you?" I was like, "Oh wow, who is this woman?" And then they paired me with her as my mentor, and I was like, "Okay." But no, it was a beautiful mentorship, and following that, people joke with me, but I literally did like 10 fellowships. I did like Bay Area Video Coalition, Film Independent. Like I literally did a year of fellowships, but what I learned in that time space was like really how to make a film from like the greatest people to do it. And I'm really grateful for that, because I don't think a lot of first-time filmmakers experience that investment. I credit a lot to Cai Thomas for taking the risk on me early on, like straight out of Diverse Voices in Docs. They approached me about being in development and then eventually a co-production. And I think it's really hard, especially for first-time filmmakers of color, for women of color, to get people to believe that you're going to actually finish a film. And so we kept getting little grants throughout, like 10,000 here, 15,000 here. But we didn't get the major investment from the Ford Foundation until like May of 2019. And so that means for 3 or so years, we have been working with many grants. And that's why I can't thank my team enough, because they really put in a lot of in-kind support. But yeah, after that, we received the Ford Foundation grant, and it was like all of a sudden when we had a rough cut of the film, everyone was like, "Oh, you can actually do it." So that's when we got not to shade the funders that came in at the end, but
That's okay.
but yeah, that's when we received more of the major funding. And I think really being a part of these fellowships connected me to larger networks, like Cai was saying, being part of the Sisters in Cinema Fellowship, being part of Firelight. They really were able to connect me. Like, the reason we're in the theater right now is because Yvonne connected me to somebody who was able to book the film. Or because Tim, I don't know if you're still here, but Tim, who previously worked at Cartemquin, hooked us up with the Siskel. So at some point, I just was asking everyone for a possible favor. But I think the community of support has really grown in the past 5 or so years in Chicago, especially for filmmakers of color. Mescla Media Collective, also in the building, who really supports. And so I've just learned that the coalition is like really essential in filmmaking spaces. And I just think there needs to be a broader education about distribution paths and funding paths, because independent film, it really depends on like grants and institutions that support that to be able to move it forward. And I'm gonna stop talking. There's a lot more, but that's all I got.
You sure?
I don't know. There's a lot more. You got it. Yeah.
I'll give it back to you. First, I'd like to thank Yvonne and Sisters in Cinema, because 20 years ago, what you're doing right now was not available to us, right? So seriously, big kudos, because being able to have this kind of network and coalition and what Sisters in Cinema is incredible, and would have launched a lot of our careers and taken us a lot farther. So thank you sincerely, sister, for what you've been doing. And she and I had met, 20 years ago at a screening of one of the documentaries I did on Margaret Walker, and connected then, and then kind of fell out of touch with each other. So I don't remember what your question was, but I'd like to speak to more than a mini case study. I guess I'd like to speak to the networking and how to stay in the game in the long term. Because I've done 4 or 5 independent docs, and each time it needed to take 2 to 5 years to recover. And I'll come back to that in a minute, as well as 3 commissioned full-length documentaries for different broadcasters. Most of my work has been distributed on public broadcasting, the long-form pieces, and then I've done a lot of shorter mini docs for a lot of nonprofits and advocacy work. But the roller coaster that has been my life as Juneteenth Productions has also been about my passion of wanting to continue to be a filmmaker and do work that matters. But aside from the recovery time from being immersed in the whole documentary process, as well as either doing all of the parts by yourself or whatever the team is, I've called in every professional favor plus some. My first documentary particularly, my own money. The whole funding circuit is depressing and humiliating. And, after my first documentary was picked up by PBS Primetime, I was naive to think like, oh, I've gotten funding, I'm on broadcast, people know me, I'd worked at WTTW for years, I'd won awards, and every time I've gone out to do a documentary, it's like starting from scratch. Wow. Even if they know you. So what's been important, and again, kudos to Yvonne and Sisters in Cinema, is staying in touch with each other, and like what you guys are doing in terms of sharing and talents and equipment, but also continuing out the network. And one of the things I am learning late to the game that I've done with this passion project, Change Agents, is being comfortable talking about your new ideas. Mm-hmm. Where I had often thought, well, I need to have something undone on paper or a rough cut, but I've been amazed with this podcast series, Change Agents, as my co-executive producer and I talked about it, people, we were invited in to areas that I didn't even know you could be invited into. Right. So just talking it up to be able to get funding from the Field Foundation when Kyra Kyles was there with their media and storytelling, I had no idea that was available. And finding a fiscal sponsor, City Bureau, who I love those people. Chicago Community Trust came in. I had no idea that there were funds available to, quote unquote, for-profits to do work in community, particularly in the Black community. So that all comes about by continuing to talk and to continuing to share and to come and then just stay in it. Sometimes you eat, sometimes you don't, right? But you get comfortable with like every other week I'm gonna have a meal, and it's cool, right?
Outside people must think we're like. They're like, why are y'all making documentaries?
But I was able to raise my son as a single parent, and he got through college, so, it works. It's just trying to The hardest part is dividing out when you have an idea and a project you're working on, knowing it's going to take you more than 2 weeks to work on it, while you also need to earn a living. So picking up the side jobs or the big jobs or the teaching jobs, but still keeping your eye on, I really want to get this done and I know it can happen. Just it's going to, knowing it's going to take longer than you want it to, for me, has been the most frustrating part of staying in documentary film. And I'm going to shut up now.
That was wonderful. Thank you all. And to what everyone was saying, one of the things that we decided to do at Sisters in Cinema with our Doc Fellows program is to not make it a year-long program, but a career-long program. So they're in the program until they decide to leave, which I don't know when that's going to happen. Because,
Program?
well, right now the program's for, it's for emerging filmmakers and even.
Emerging? It's always emerging.
And even though they're both under 30, we do
I
have.
can be under 30?
No, one of our emerging filmmakers is 54. So, and was in the cohort with Ashley and Cai. So she's been in the program also since 2019. So, because you do need support all along the way. You really do. So, this is a really short panel. So we have one other question, prompt for all of you. And this prompt is, can you tell us like one tool or like secret to success that something you think everybody really needs to know? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay. What is the secret to success?
I have 2 secrets to success. Find somebody you trust, who you can cry to, share ideas with, who has your back, even if they're not in the production process. That has been a lifesaver, having different individuals at different times who I could just share everything and feel that I'm not, as I'm bouncing things off of walls. Secondly, I think a good would be, if you're not a good writer, find a friend or find $2 to pay somebody to write grants, proposals, to write promotional material. Usually when I get to the end of a project, we ran out of money for promotion, or we ran out of money for submitting to film festivals, and trying to be exhausted and also try to write, as well as to go back and do final reports with foundations. Having somebody else or somebody's else is critical, and thinking about that early on in your process.
I have a final report due today.
No, they're going to be okay. That is late. Just send them a note.
I would say, like, I'm a big craft person. I watch a lot of movies. I read a lot. I think it is really important to know, like, what the landscape of documentary is and, like, what certain broadcasters are looking for, what certain funders are looking for, but also, like, doing the projects you genuinely want to do. Like, as Judith said, like, her projects take 2 to 5 years. Like, Change the Name started in 2018 and now is living in this big way in 2021. That's like 3 years of my life. And there are other films that have, like, started and, like, have their own lives. And I think in documentary, there's a lot of, like, RFPs, which are called requests for proposals, where people will be like, hey, thematically, we're looking for XYZ. But I think as a filmmaker, you really have to know the film you genuinely want to make and then find the match with the funders, rather than funders telling you, hey, make XYZ film. Because if not, it is a brutal process. And the other thing I would say is, talk about your projects. If I wouldn't have told Yvonne that, like, hey, I'm starting to film again with, like, the VLA young folks, this wouldn't have existed in this way. And just having folks that you trust. I probably talked to Ashley and then Rosita Cox, who's another Sisters in Cinema fellow, probably multiple times every single day, which is really helpful, whether it's something as little as, like, oh my God, this camera setting is different, I don't know what this is, to, like, hey, I want to pitch, our film to Teen Vogue. Do you have a contact? And Ashley will send it to me. So it all just varies. No. That's why I did that.
Y'all see how petty Cai is. No, she know what she doing. I definitely echo what both Judith and Cai have said, and then I would just add, don't be afraid to ask questions. I think in the film space, especially I think I learned being in the space with a lot of experienced people that have been doing it for 20 plus years. People will try to kind of get by talking about things in a certain way and just expect you to understand. That's been something, especially in the distribution space, that I have had to advocate for myself for. I think that I luckily have a really strong team that is willing to explain things to me. But on top of that, I found that often when I ask questions, it forces the person on the other side to actually think about what they're saying. And that's really critical when you're being offered deals on the table that are saying we want to take X amount percentage. I'm speaking in vague terms, but want to take X amount percentage of this deal, but what am I going to actually see on the return on investment? Am I actually going to be able to make a profit off of this film that I have gone into debt for? And so I think it's just really essential to advocate for yourself in the space and not feel like an amateur or that it's a stupid question because they're used to working with certain people in the space. And yeah, I think just find your tribe. It's really important to be able to have a group of people that you can kind of just let your hair down and be honest about what you're going through. For me, on Unapologetic, like working with a group of other emerging Black creatives like Morgan and Ruben, I felt like I didn't have to like shed parts of myself to show up into the edit room or to show up on set time after time. And so I think it's just really important to find that group that you feel like you can be 100% with, because then the work is going to be more authentic and what it's meant to be as a result of that.
That was great. Thank you all. Well, our panel is ended. I want to thank Mescla, of course, our sisters in cinema, and who was the other sponsor?
These are y'all too. Y'all right.
Just us.
Yeah.
Mescla, Sisters in Cinema, Black Women in Film panel. Thank you, the audience, for being here, for coming to see Ashley's amazing film, and for spending a little time with us. Enjoy.
Tell everybody to come. The film is running through Friday. Please tell everybody to come see it. We're on social media at Unapologetic. Unapologetic Doc?
Thursday.
Oh, Thursday. Okay, Bella.
Bella knows.
And there's also merch available for purchase in the lobby.
And Bella, I saw a grant for you today, Bella. I need your email address. I realize I don't have it because I was like, Bella needs to apply for this grant. I saw it had your name on it, so let's talk.
Also, the team.
I'm serious.
The team will be in New York on Friday at Cinema Village in the Maisels Documentary Center, and then in LA at the Limley, if you all know anybody over there as well. Okay.
And then it's going on to other cities.
Yes, please share.
This is very.
And we'll be nationally broadcast on POV on December 27th. Good night.
Thank you all.